As about 3:30 this afternoon, I almost wasn't here with us either. If you had that bad storm come through, everybody see the lightning and all the craziness about 3:30 come through today? Well, if you go up to our office area through Hightower Hall into the gym and then right at our offices, and you look at that first tree that's right there, lightning hit that tree at about 3:30 as I was walking out that door to go take stuff to the high school hall area to put out for the classes. Lightning hit that tree. Wood literally landed in the little cart thing that I was carrying. I think I peed a little bit as well. I was deaf for a moment. It was crazy. Jennifer, our secretary who sits up front, literally jumped out of her chair and went screaming around the hall. It was pretty crazy, was it not, Casey? Casey was around for that moment. Pretty crazy moment. And then we all saw the tree. You can see the big, huge mark, the pieces of wood. It was pretty wild. So I tweeted about it, Instagrammed about it, all that kind of good stuff. It was pretty crazy for that moment. But I'm glad I'm here. Didn't get messed up by that. Also, the clock isn't working up there. It says it's 3:10. So if I have till 7:30, right, to preach, 7:20, I got 4 hours and 10 minutes that I will definitely not use. I am very short-winded. In fact, you'll probably think, oh, that was it? Yep, that's going to be it tonight. We won't take a long time. We're going to work through the scriptures. I talk fast, so you got to pay attention. You can tweet things if you want to, but pay attention because I don't waste time. I hopefully won't do much of that. So we're going to jump in. It's kind of funny that Jeff asked me a couple weeks ago to preach on this Wednesday since he knew he'd be out of town, and when he gave me the scripture reference that we're walking through in the book of Hebrews, and we've been walking through Hebrews for months now, when I read it, I just had to chuckle. I just kind of had to laugh, like, really? This is the message I get to preach. And so the first thing I kind of want to bring up as we get started is simply this. Connotations of words have very much a meaning. And if you don't know what the word connotation means, it means the meaning of the word. What the word means to you. Like when you hear a specific word, it has some kind of meaning, connotation to you. And tonight, there's two words that we're going to deal with that can have a wide range of thoughts for you. That for you, they may mean one thing, and for me, they may mean another. And so we're going to work through those words tonight to help us make sure we get on the same page and that kind of aware as we walk through Hebrews. And so the first word we're going to talk about, and it's the whole point of the whole sermon, is the word discipline. And in fact, I said, well, might as well go to the internet and type in definition of discipline and figure out what the definition of discipline is. So here you go. You ready? The practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. All right, I'll say it again. The practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. And so this was a kind of a flag to me. And in fact, Jeff said it on Sunday when he was preaching the sermon, that he had portions of this sermon where he thought, how can I make this more palatable, more easy for you to hear? And it's kind of hard to do that, period, because there's certain scriptures that are just going to be difficult. There's certain portions of scriptures that aren't going to be easy to deal with. And fortunately, tonight, the scriptures we're going to walk through in Hebrews kind of lands in that area. And so I want to take the connotation because that's not really the best direction. In fact, if you've been with us through our Hebrews series, we've almost talked about how works and obeying rules and codes and all that kind of stuff, we couldn't do it to begin with. The Jewish people didn't do it in the Old Testament. That's why Jesus showed up. He fulfilled the law for us. He obeyed the rules for us. And so the fact that we're going to now talk about discipline and doing that kind of a thing almost butts up against almost all that we've been teaching through this series. And so one thing you have to think about here at the beginning is this is a portion of the letter in the book of Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews, the Jewish Christians. This is a portion of it. So we have 12 chapters before this of stuff written about, and then we get to this portion, these 9 verses, and then we have more chapters to come. And so we have to make sure we don't take these verses out of the context that they're written, and we pay attention to what they're written in. And so as we get there, make sure we get a good, and we'll see in a few minutes, a good definition of discipline. And so, as I told you a minute ago, it was kind of fun. I chuckled when I got this message because the past 9 weeks of my life have been crazy, all right? So we had a little girl, July 1st. So yesterday was 9 weeks. And it's been wild, all right? Girls, can't figure you out. Still can't figure you out. Been married for 10 years, can't figure her out. 9 weeks, definitely can't figure her out. And so it's been a wild, crazy ride. People have asked me, how can you pray for you? And I said, here's the 3 things that I need. I need sleep, I need strength, and I need a schedule. All right, sleep, strength, and a schedule, because I need a schedule is killing me, not being on a schedule, not knowing what's going on. It sounds like a really bad old Baptist sermon, the alliteration of the S's and everything like that. That's what I need. I need sleep, I need strength, I need a schedule, something fierce, because she has not given it to us. She's great. Her name is Karis. We love her to death, but she has made these last several weeks, and why almost funny to read these and walk through these scriptures even funnier. It's been an emotional roller coaster, as crazy as that sounds. I don't like being emotional, but I've been more emotional in the last 9 weeks than I've been in the last 9 years. It's been wild. Probably due to the fact, too, I just moved here 5 months ago with a family and all this kind of stuff, away from home for the first time, even though I'm 35, first time away from home. So it's been crazy, crazy, crazy. So when we get to these verses, I'm like, okay, here we go. God's trying to say something. That's why he's gifted me this opportunity. And so before we get into Hebrews chapter 12, if you have your mobile app, you can pull it up. It'll have the points. We'll be in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 through 12 or 13, I think, somewhere right around there. I wanted to read a verse that kind of came to mind that's been really on my heart for the past several weeks and kind of get us going. It comes from the Apostle Paul. He wrote it to the church who happened to be located in Corinth, and this was his second letter, maybe even third letter that he'd written to them. And this is what he says in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. He says, each time he said, now each time what he's referring to is Paul had something going wrong. There's something very much going wrong. He either had some kind of mental or physical deformity, or he was going blind. Something was making it very difficult for Paul to do his job. And he says in 3 different times, seasons, occasions, not just like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but 3 different seasons, I asked God to take away this terrible thing from me. And God said no. And when God said no, he writes this next verse. Each time he says, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I, Paul, am glad to boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ can work through me. When we look tonight at the words discipline and where it goes to in the Hebrews, what we also have to understand in that is all the verses before in Hebrews and the idea that God's grace is working in us at all times as his children. And so I had a few quotes that I wanted to read to you before we jump into the verses. The first one comes from Jerry Bridges. He's a pastor, author, theologian, and he says this: all of God's disciplinary processes are grounded in his grace, his unmerited and unconditional favor towards us. We tend to equate discipline with rules and performance standards, i.e. the definition we said earlier. God equates it with a firm but loving care for our souls. And in fact, I was watching another sermon this past week, and I had an even better quote, and I was like, I have to add this in there too. And here's what it says. We need to stop equating friction in our lives with God's seeming absence. That when friction comes, God must be absent. We have to stop doing that. The presence of adversity doesn't mean that the absence of God. There is no actual correlation between God's lack of cooperation and God's love for us. I'll read that last one again because that's the most important. There is not an actual correlation between God's lack of cooperation and God's love for us. So I want you to understand, for the past 9 weeks, I've prayed on many occasions, Lord, just let her go to sleep. Just let her go to sleep. That's all we ask. Just let her go to sleep. Please, please, please. When she doesn't go to sleep, do you think God's thinking, no, I don't love you. I don't like you anymore, so I'm not going to let her sleep. Or Lord, please just let her finish the bottle. Just finish the bottle. We need her to eat all 4 ounces. Not just 3, all 4. God's going, nope, not going to do it. We can't make the connection between God's lack of cooperation with God's love for us. If it were true, then we would have thought our parents didn't love us either, right? Because did your parents always cooperate with you? When you went to the dentist and had them grind your teeth, did you think, they love me right now, right? But was it what was best for you? Was it what's good for you? Of course. And so as we get into the verses tonight, I want us to kind of remember this, and this is the really big point that I want you to remember. Buck Parsons, he's a pastor down in Florida, he said it this way. He tweeted this out about 2 weeks ago. He said, "Dear doubting believer, one of the greatest assurances God gives you of your adoption, your relationship with him, is his fatherly discipline, proving his love for you." It's amazing. Let me read it again. "Dear doubting believer, one of the greatest assurances God gives you of your adoption is his fatherly discipline, proving his love for you." All right? So if I could sum up this entire message in one statement, this is the statement I would want to do it up. Discipline is part of the relationship. In your relationship with God, discipline is part of the relationship. All right, so like I said, we've jumped into the scriptures. We're jumping into a portion of the scripture, portion of this letter. So let's jump into Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 through 6. The first point is this: trust God's discipline to help you fight against sin. And here's what he says in the verses. "After all, you have not yet given your lives in your struggle against sin. And have you forgotten the encouraging words God spoke to you as his children? He said, 'My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child.'" So this verse comes right on the heels of Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, which I wish I could have preached that message. I like those verses a lot better. In fact, the last message I've been here about 5 months, the last message I preached at my last church was Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. I thought if I could have my church remember anything about me, it would be Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Not really realizing what comes next in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4, and so on. Man, keep focused. You're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Keep running the race. Get rid of the sin that easily entangles. And in fact, the points that Jeff made on that sermon was run smart. Don't get caught up in sin. Stay focused. Don't quit. Well, in all of that, God then uses discipline to get us there. God uses discipline to help us fight against what really can hurt us. And what really can do damage to us is not having discipline. What really hurts us is sin. So the discipline wages war against sin. You know the old phrase, have you heard it? Remember, if you've been in church a long time, you've heard this phrase before, I'm sure. Sin will always take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you wanted to stay, and cost you more than you intended to pay. The truth is, God uses in his relationship with us, discipline to do that. Now, the truth is, I read for you earlier what discipline meant in our dictionary, if you looked it up online. Discipline here in the Greek is the word paideia, which was common term for child rearing through instruction, training, and correction. All right? So it brings the relationship to it. If you have children, you know what this is. You discipline them to teach them, to instruct them, to train them, to correct them. In verse 5, he's speaking of Proverbs chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, where it says, "My child, do not reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you, for the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." Now, I told you I have a 9-week-old. I also have a 4, almost 5-year-old. And as his father, he can get pretty upset with me because I'm constantly trying to discipline him or correct him or train him in the ways he should go. And the reason I do that is because he's my child. It's my responsibility. My responsibility is not your children. My responsibility is my children. I love him. I don't necessarily love your kids. I don't even know your kids, I don't think. But he's my child. I will take care of him, and I'm going to take care of him and his sisters above others. So that's the whole reason, because there's a relationship. And we should find some encouragement through this because it proves our sonship. We are God's children. That's why we are being disciplined. So again, discipline is part of the relationship. Number 2, trust God's discipline to help you endure suffering. This is verses 7 through 11 of chapter 12. Here's what it says. As you endure, there is some enduring to be done, this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Who ever heard of a child who was never disciplined by its father? Stop right there. Time out. Anybody know the kid who wasn't disciplined by his parent? He had the cool parent, and the cool parent let them get away with anything, and you realize they probably need some boundaries and everything else in their life. I mean, we get this. We see this. If God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they know how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in his holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. Thank you, Captain Obvious. But afterwards, there would be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. So here we go. A little bit of this is I understand the connotation of some words that are in these scriptures, in these verses specifically. The connotation here is the word father. Jeff mentioned this on Sunday, and he and I actually talked about this before this sermon came to point. But when I say the word father, for some of you, you think of a great man who's lived a great life. Maybe he's still alive or maybe recently passed, and you wish your life would emulate his. For others, you hear the word father and have very negative connotations. Absent father, abusive father. A guy named Louis Giglio made a great statement one time. He said this. He said, God is not the reflection of our earthly father, but the perfection of our earthly father. When you really see who God is, you can see that he is what our father should have been. Even our good fathers, they're not perfect. God is that perfect father. So I understand that we have to work through some of that because of your experiences with the Father. But through lots of time and experience with God, I hope that you can see that he is the perfect father. That last sentence here is what we also have to keep in front of us as well, that afterwards there's a peaceful harvest. Whether that's here on earth or in heaven as part of the new earth, peace is coming. So I have to keep running. Or as Dory said, keep swimming. Just keep swimming. Yep. So there's 4 things in these verses that you got to remember, and these are some of the things that Jeff went over Sunday, and I thought they were too good not to mention again tonight. He said this, 4 things that his discipline does for us. First of all, his discipline for us is for our good. It really is for our good. Now, it's not for our good like if you've seen the video this past week on Facebook of a certain lady who stood in front of a very large church in Texas and made a very blasphemous statement, and then you see Bill Cosby come up on the screen and say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, or stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's not that kind of for our good. It's for our good because it brings God glory, and in God's glory, there is goodness for us. It does bring for our good. Next, discipline makes us more like him, right? I remember showing a video of the Passion of the Christ to my student ministry years ago, and I showed Jesus being beat like he was in the movie, and then I sat there and went, and we want to be like Jesus? That's what we call ourselves as Christians, Christ followers. I want to be like him, and there he is being beaten. Discipline makes us more like him, but the good thing is there's a purpose behind it. It happens for a reason. Next, discipline allows us a harvest of right living. God uses discipline to remove sin that easily entangles us so that we can have a season of right living. We'll harvest, we'll get what we need. And lastly, discipline is for our peace. Remember, discipline is part of our relationship. If you feel like you're being disciplined, it's a good thing. It means you're his. It means you belong to him and he's taking care of you. It means you're in a relationship with him. Number 3, trust in God's discipline to make your faith stronger. So verses 12 and 13 say this, so take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. Mark out a straight path for your feet so that those who are weak and lame will not fall but become strong. So we end almost where we begin. Through God's grace, we can get a new grip. Remember, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. And as we can see from the first word in all three of our points, it's simply about trust. So I went to the internet again, Googled trust, definition of trust, and here's what we get. A firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. So all of these trials and all the discipline you go through simply shows us how much we trust God or whether we trust in something else. So the question becomes, do we have a firm belief in the reliability, trust, ability, and strength of God? And the only way to know if it's firm is if we put some weight on it. So it's kind of like sitting on a stool. This is a stool, right? Everybody believe this is a stool? You see it? Intellectually, you can not agree with me that this is a stool. 4 legs, right? It's got some bars in between to help it be sturdy. Has a top to it, right? Am I trusting that this is a stool? Yes, no, I'm not trusting that it's a stool. I'm intellectually saying it's a stool, but how will I trust that it's a stool? What do I have to do? Yeah, I have to put my weight on it, sit on it. And when I sit on it, then I trust it, correct? I haven't trusted it until I put my, it's kind of like the trust fall. I haven't trusted it until I sit on it and know. If one of the legs was missing, I still may say that's a stool. I would then say it's a broken stool. I wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't trust my weight on it. I wouldn't sit on it. And so through this discipline, what we're doing and what we're saying is, what do we put our weight on? What do we put our weight in? I love the song that, I didn't know the song that Michael was going to do. I didn't know that he was going to do it. I know the song, the last one we sang, I Trust You, by Aaron Keys. Great song. Have it on my iPod, iPhone, and I love it. Listen to it quite often. I was glad he did it. And the bridge of that song is so true. I mean, what are we trusting in? Our wisdom, our might, our riches? What do we trust in? Are we trusting in God? So tonight I want us to think about trust a little bit more, and what trust really looks like is rest. I rested on the chair. I was able to get a new grip for tired hands and strengthen my weak knees because I rested. I want to encourage you to rest. Rest in what God's done for you. Rest in that the discipline, if you are in a season of discipline, that God is using it for your good. And the way I want to encourage you tonight is I want to show you a video. It's a song by a guy named Aaron Keys, by a guy named Andrew Peterson. And it's a song called Rest Easy. And please listen to the words while you'll watch the video. Is kind of a dramatic scene of some sort. But listen for the words too, because it definitely helps us see that our relationship with God, the discipline is a part of the relationship with God, and that if we have a relationship with God, that's what discipline's all about. And so if you see the next steps that we have on the mobile app, you can look through those and see how that's, but I want you to take just a few minutes to watch this video, and then the band will come up and do our last song together. All right?